Peace and blessings, soul family. Adam Jackson here with another episode of the Sacred Sons podcast. Brothers and sisters, what type of impact are you having out in the world? Today we have a very impactful guest by the name of Marc Angelo Coppola. And so, we're going to talk about how to have impact in the larger ways. You know, with Sacred Sons and the work we do, we talk a lot about individual growth, collective embodiment, yes, but in what ways can we as men, as women, as brothers and sisters have real impact in this world? And one of the ways that Sacred Sons is having impact, so we are bringing this work to Europe this summer. Yes, Sacred Sons is coming to Europe through July and August. We embark on our maiden voyage, landing in Ireland, July 2nd through 3rd for our first immersion. Then we're on to Paris, July 9th and 10th, and into Prime Leadership Scotland. That's a 5-day event, July 13th through 17th in Selkirk, Scotland. I'll see you there, Scotland. That's what I'm talking about. I feel like, I've said it before, I feel proud about this, but it's more than that. It's like what we're doing by calling in this type of work. It's like, it's so powerful, and the brothers who have participated in it know like what the impact of this work is. So for us to bring this work back to Europe through these immersions and these trainings, and really calling in leadership from the men in Europe who feel called to this movement, it's really what it is. After Prime Leadership Scotland, we're coming to 4 other cities across Europe. If you are interested, please go to sacredsons.com and click on Europe to register for those events today. All right, and with that, our guest today, he's a farmer, he's an entrepreneur, he's a philanthropist, and he's a storyteller. And he is utilizing and bringing those gifts together with land, with water, with regenerative agriculture and natural ecosystems, combining all that with community to create and build the farm of the future. This is where we're going today, fam. Drop in, please welcome Marc Angelo Coppola.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for being here, brother. So I'm just gonna start here. You're building the farm of the future. Say more.
Yeah. I guess to talk about the farm of the future, maybe we need to dive into the farm of the past. 10 years ago, just over 10 years ago, this is now our 10th season on this farm. I walked out in the middle of a GMO corn and soya field, Monsanto sprayed, laced. I mean, nothing would grow there, absolutely pillaged of all diversity, of all soil biology, of all life, in the most, human or man conquering kind of way, where man kind of was destroying nature, or I don't want to say destroying, but it's a
really colonizing, you know what I mean? Like,
oh, absolutely. It's a full disrespect to the natural ecosystems in the pursuit of profit. Easiest way to say it. And I walked out in the middle of a 88-acre GMO corn and soya field. Part of it is forested, 20 minutes outside of downtown Montreal. So I'm Montreal born and raised. I live in the old port of Montreal, and I'm 22 minutes away from the farm. So it's one of the closest farms to the city center and the closest eco villages to a city center in the entire planet. And I've visited a lot of eco villages around the world over the years and learned a lot about building community, a lot about storytelling, a lot about a bunch of different things. But I walked out in the middle of that GMO cornfield, knew absolutely nothing about planting trees or growing food or building. We built like earthships or solar panels or you name it, any of these things that are kind of the alternative lifestyle. Knew nothing about any of that. Had a background, studied in finance and accounting, graduated in marketing and entrepreneurship, and been doing a lot of marketing work for many years. Running agencies and a bunch of stuff.
Just right here, when you saw the farm, knowing nothing, what inspired you to bring bring it back to the ways of a natural ecosystem. Like what's the moment where you go, you know what, we're not going the right way.
Yeah, I at the beginning, I couldn't say necessarily that that's even what I had the words for. So I couldn't have said the words permaculture or regenerative agriculture because I didn't know them, and I didn't know what that even meant. What I knew is that as I was graduating from university, I felt like incredibly desperate for a sense of connection and needing something really real in my life. At the same time, I had gone through the school of life, which I was an entrepreneur the entire time I was at university. I was running an indoor skate park here in Montreal. And that was like super challenging and interesting. And there was all these amazing challenges that I went through and like literally created a huge business, saved a skate park that was going to go bankrupt within a few weeks and turned it around, survived the financial crisis, sold the business 3 years later. And that's what I used the money to eventually buy this farm. But between that, I graduated from university and I just decided I wasn't going to let schooling get in the way of my education. And what that felt like was that everything I was learning in school was all theory. It was all to prepare me for some job in some corporate office. It was all to prepare me to kind of do the right thing and follow my parents' kind of will in some capacity. But none of it felt real. None of it was actually connected to how entrepreneurship really worked. And I had seen and experienced both of those things.
Yeah.
And
so
I
just want to jump in right here. I can feel how driven you are and how motivated you are. I feel like if you're into human design, you must be a generator or a man generator.
I'm not. I'm a projector, actually.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
What do we got going on here? Okay. So
I think I spit a lot of fire for sure.
So right here, just because we're getting to know each other, I want to invite us to drop in. And let's take a deep breath for ourselves right here. We're going to continue the conversation. Deep breath in through the nose. You can feel where we're going today, where this conversation is going. And it's just so from right here, amidst the story that we're getting into. From your farm, you know, that you've invested your not only your resources, but your passion and this energy into. What's most alive with you today, right now?
The destruction of every layer and core value that democracy, the free world, freedom, brotherhood, sisterhood, trust in the system, free market dynamics. I mean, just absolute destruction of all things sovereignty and personal choice. And we're just in this time frame where we're printing too much money, we're inflating the hell out of everything, we're artificially pumping in the same way that they were artificially pumping chemicals into the field of the GMO corn and soya field that I walked onto. We're artificially propping up a human-made, I won't say man-made, because I think, you know, although I will acknowledge the role many men have played in this, just this system of complete dissociation and pursuit of profit only, and a pursuit of individualism and ego, and some level of like more.
And when you feel into that, let me ask you this: when you feel into that, what emotions do you feel around that? Like when you really tap in, like what is the present emotion that is with you around this?
Yeah, present. I think it's evolved. Well, it's evolved. My initial emotion, and that's what started the farm, was absolute anger, like total, like I'm like the you know, the symbol of like a fist that's coming together and like we are going to build a revolution, and like the whole like fuck this system, you know. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this podcast, but like this whole like rebellion. You know, our initial mission statement was like, we're hell bent on building the world we know is possible in our hearts, right? And like to me, the hell bent piece was quite real. And I think over time, it's evolved into an understanding. Like I understand why we're here. I understand how we got here. I understand the logic that it took and the jumps that we've made, and I see the progression of this story continuously unfolding.
Yes.
And I actually feel very hopeful because I know that any great story requires an amazingly powerful villain. And right now we have a huge villain in the form of so many different things. And I don't think it's a left or right thing. I don't think it's like, you know, I don't think there's one finger to point in any one direction, but there is definitely a common and collective sense of, okay, we absolutely need to change here. And that's real.
It's very real. And so what you're left with is hope. And that's why I like you, bro. Because it's like, you know, there's still a glimmer, or there's still something to look towards. And a piece that I always like to bring through, and I'm checking in with it, is that for me, it's not about tearing down the old. It's not even about blaming or calling out or canceling the villain. It's about creating the new.
Agreed.
That's always been what it's about.
Absolutely.
And so, like, yes, we will in ways, you know, infiltrate these systems that do exist. And we do. Consciousness is happening. You know, people are in all types of positions and becoming aware of like how our actions as human beings impact this planet. And hopefully those type of conscious individuals start leading some of these companies in a, you know, in a more ecological direction, you could say. But even that's not enough. That's not enough. What I'm talking about and what you're doing is building the new there, because there's an opportunity and there's a new way to interact with our ecosystem. So I'm going to pull us out of this little check-in portal and come right back into the story.
Yeah. So well, let me just say that the new way is actually quite old. And what I mean by that is it's actually not, I'm not inventing any of this. I'm just understanding and taking enough time to listen. You know, the first principle of permaculture, for those who don't know what permaculture means, it means permanent culture. So what would you, if you were to look at a forest, how does a forest naturally evolve from, let's say, a GMO cornfield all the way to a forest with big trees? And there's stages of this. Well, the theory is that there's 10 different stages, and it kind of goes from like weeds all the way to grasslands, all the way to forest over time. And certain plants love to be next to other plants because they have different root systems. Some go deeper, some go laterally. They use different resources, or they use different nutrients in the soil. Some restore certain nutrients while others take that same nutrient. So for example, I use this example all the time, but it's like tomatoes, basil, and asparagus grow really well together. And it's because the way that they shade the ground, the things that they do, the repellents that they have for each other's pests, and they just tend to fit in a dish really well, particularly if you like Italian cuisine. But the idea being, there's a lot of wisdom that has come through over the years that we get to learn and relearn, and that's why we use the term regenerative, because it used to be generative, and we are regenerating it. So, you know, none of what I'm sharing here is necessarily my wisdom. And I'll say that, you know, as you said, building the new, you know, Buckminster Fuller said it best. It's like, you know, we're not going to change the world by tearing down the old one. I'm paraphrasing here. Yeah. We need to build a new paradigm that makes the old one obsolete. Right. And that's really what Buckminster Fuller kind of put out into the world. I think it was brilliant. And I'll also add a quote from Gandhi, which is like, actions express priorities. And we're in a moment in time where, unfortunately, but also fortunately, we are no longer going to have the choice as to whether or not we get involved in the solution or we continue to perpetuate the problem. Unfortunately, I just think that we are on the precipice of a recession. I think we're already in it, to be honest. I think we've inflated our currency. We've just destroyed the fabric of trust. Nobody knows what to believe anymore. Whether do you believe the narrative around, you know, the health narratives that have been pushed over the last 2 years? Do you not? It doesn't really matter. It doesn't even, we can't discern truth anymore. We're in a post-truth world. Now, you can blame, some people blame Trump for it. Some people blame the media. Some people blame it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because that's where we are. And so I think I'm just pragmatic in not trying to get too involved in the politics of it, and then saying, well, what can I do? Like, what can me, the person, do? And I approached life with a lot of stoicism around, like, you know, what can I control? And the thing I could control, and what led me to walk out in the middle of a GMO corn and soya field and declare I was going to build the school I wish I could have gone to physically and digitally, and the community I wish I could have grew up in physically and digitally, was I just felt like we needed more trees. It came from me out of a moment of desperation. It's like, if I don't do this, if I'd watched, I started watching a documentary every single week for 52 weeks when I graduated university. And I just learned over and over and over again about all the problems. And the most common thread, like beyond peak oil and the vanishing of the bees and the decimation of our rainforests and all the different challenges we're facing around the globe, the problem that I actually realized, the common thread or the golden thread between all of those documentaries, was that they spent 95% of the time talking about a problem and sounding the alarm, and very little about what I can actually do about it.
Yeah, and it's more fear mongering to
it sells the documentary.
Machine. Yeah.
Yeah. And we know that happens in today's culture. As somebody who's been working in marketing and telling stories online that reach millions and millions of people, if not maybe billions at this point, I fully understand that there's two things that go viral: enraging and awe-inspiring. And it's way easier to do enraging content, and it's way easier to get people to kind of like drum up against something than they are sometimes for something.
So right here, I want to drum up somebody for something, because I have a question. So in this new paradigm, how does regenerative agriculture, play its role in creating the new way? Let's just getting into a little bit of the nitty gritty, but like,
sure,
in literally a week where there's news around food shortages, baby formula shortages. Notice there's no Tesla shortages or iPhone shortages. You know what I'm talking about?
Absolutely.
So like in a time where they're talking about this, what is the role of regenerative agriculture?
Yeah. Beyond the simple answer of like, it's literally the foundational principle of how everything can regenerate. My personal thought is that, number one, it connects us back to nature. Okay. So I'm going to start at the human first. Like, if you don't know where your food comes from and you've never spent, like, look, you eat every day, right? How much time have you spent growing food or understanding where food comes from, or even supporting people who grow food? Like, truly, like just supporting your local farmer and going and visiting a farm and even knowing anything about how it works.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're never going to have personal sovereignty unless you have some capacity to source your own food in some way, shape, or form. Right now, that might look like hunting, that might look like fishing, it might look like a million things. For me, it looks like growing. It looks like a bit of all of those things. Right. But I think that fundamentally, if we don't know where and how our food is sourced, and we don't have an awareness of the fact that there are massive problems in our food system, and we have an erosion of the soil, erosion of nutrients, water problems, where in Canada, I think it's like, or in North America, I think 40% of the food comes from California, and California is running out of water. Now, every once in a while, we get a little bit more snowpack. It rains a little bit more in California, crisis averted for this year. But at what point does that continue to be the case? Like, it only takes one season for it to be a problem.
No, it's been trending down for a long time, and Lake Mead, which serves the entire Southwest, is like at all-time lows.
Oh, absolutely.
And the interesting part is that's not in the news cycle.
No, not at all.
Amidst all the other very real problems, it's like, oh wow, we're actually running out of water.
Absolutely. And you might have heard a little bit about like, oh, well, Ukraine creates a third of the world's wheat or whatever, a third or a quarter of the world's wheat. And Russia produces an enormous amount of phosphorus, for example, or fertilizers that we need on our farms. Well, what I can tell you right now is that the price of inputs on farms right now, I'm living this, okay, is up threefold minimum. Wow. 3 or 4-fold. So the same price I was paying for Black Earth last year is up significantly. The price of gas is up. So guess what? Soon the price of food is going to be up. And we already have food shortages. We already have people struggling to pay their rent. We already have, a continuously compounding problem that is going to force more and more people to have to recondition or rethink how and where they're getting their food and water and the most basic necessities of life. And everyday people cannot afford housing if they didn't already have one at this point, because we just literally doubled the pricing of housing without doubling the wages that people have. And so we've always been in this perpetual system of a game of musical chairs, right? Where I learned where money came from when I learned about fractional reserve banking and all the things related to that, I watched Zeitgeist, which changed my absolute life if you've ever seen it. I just learned so much about these different systems, and I had studied that. But what was amazing is in school I was studying finance, and they never mentioned anything about this.
Yeah.
And that lit me up. The fact that nobody who was studying marketing, finance, accounting, anything had ever done any of those things, right? Like people graduate as lawyers and never spent a day being with a lawyer or in a law firm.
Right.
That's fucking fascinating to me. It doesn't make any amount of sense that we are pillaging everything from everyone all the time and then consistently not having them understand where things come from.
So where is that spark within you that is inspiring you to like do the new thing, or to seek out the next thing, or to seek out a better way? Where does that come from inside of you?
Originally, it came from desperation. It was like I either didn't want to live or I was going to do something. I honestly, I just didn't have any. I couldn't ignore the alarm that was ringing in my own head. Like I just couldn't.
Did you have it? Did you have like a personal dark night of the soul around this, or is this just like
multiple times for sure? I've used, psychedelics have greatly enhanced and changed my life. Documentaries changed my life. Being an entrepreneur changed my life. And then seeing how entrepreneurship is really, for me anyway, and storytelling is like the ultimate test of your ability to like generate something more than you, right? Like, because at the end of the day, the free market is the idea between I have to provide value for you if you're going to pay me something for whatever it is that I'm providing, right? So when people show up to the Sacred Sons events, well, they're paying you because they have this vote of confidence that they're going to have a great experience, and it continues to work and it continues to flourish because at the end of the day, you guys are generating more than you're taking. That is the definition of regenerative. You are leaving more than you are taking. And unfortunately, the way food is grown now and the way the system is working today, that is just not the case. That's actually completely the opposite. What we're doing is we're pillaging over and over and over again everywhere we go. And we're just finding new creative ways to do that. We're just offshoring it and going, oh, you know what? We don't have the resources here. No problem. Well, let's go to Africa and go mine it there. You know what I mean?
So
we're just constantly doing that.
And so you and I are not going to be able to stop that massive tidal wave from continuing to do what it's going to do.
Right.
But what we can do is like focus our attention and our energy onto like what we can do with our energy. And it's not even, for me, it's not about control. I don't think we can truly control anything. But we can command our energy in such a way, like in with such focus and clarity, that we create a new way.
Absolutely.
And it starts small, and it behooves us to think that we're doing this work not for ourselves, not even for our immediate family, but for generations to come. I mean, that's the kind of battle, if you will, that we're in right now. This is a generational thing, because the impact, I'm using the word impact all day, of what happens right now in this time in the 2020s is going to inform what's happening for the next 100 years, for the next 500 years, for the next 1,000 years, whatever it is, 7 generations, you know what I'm saying? Like, So coming back to you, we've got some regenerative agriculture, we've got some men's work, we've got some tools, we got some brotherhood and sisterhood rocking. Okay. What else is creating this new paradigm from your perspective, and what you have working and what you're working on?
I want to riff on what you just said there, because I think
okay, just go for it.
Well, no, but it's to answer your question as well, which is what is creating this new paradigm is a mindset shift into long-term thinking. Regenerative agriculture.
Wait, say that again.
Yeah.
This is beautiful.
So we're living in a short-term minded world where everything is about quarterly profits and how do we get ahead now and how do we perform today. And the stock market is rich people's feelings going up and down based on those short-term thoughts. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And I say this,
crypto is not far from it, to be honest.
I say this as a rich person in every way, shape, or form. And I wasn't that before, but I found ways to build wealth in every format by recalibrating what wealth looked like and the definition of wealth, and also the timeline of wealth. See, to me, this weekend I planted 1,000 strawberries. Okay. I have a wealth of strawberries for the rest of my life as long as I take care of them and the people around me help me take care of them. And then the people after me help take care of them. And if they see the value and they're taught the value of that forever strawberry, they will have strawberries for forever. They can take what we planted 1,000 is not that much. It's only, a couple of rows realistically, but those couple of rows can become hundreds, thousands. It's like, you've heard I think it's a Buddhist saying where it's like from a single candle, a million can be lit. Well, that's the same thing. The same is true of a tree or of a single genetic of anything that is abundant in nature. And so, but nature operates over a long time span. And so 10 years ago, when I started the farm and I planted that tree, we only got the first fruits from that tree like last year. Like you have to understand the scale at which you're starting to think. Yeah. It's like, oh, I planted a tree. It's this small, right? Like 1 foot tall. It's a year old, 2 years old tops. But that tree is eventually going to create shade around everything around it. So what am I going to plant next to it? Well, it has to love shade to some degree. And how is it going to get there? What are the stages it's going to take for it to get there? Well, I have to cover the ground so that the sun doesn't evaporate all the moisture out of the ground. So then you start thinking about everything from the perspective of ecosystem and everything from the perspective of long-term thinking.
And you know what I love about what you just said? It actually comes back to directions and elements.
Oh, 100%.
Just like, you know what I'm saying? Just feel into what that is. Like what you're actually doing is you're coming out of the time scale and coming back into seasons and directions and elements. Like which way am I facing? Where's the sun in relation to myself on this earth? And what elements do I have, as resources to utilize in this moment to bring order to this chaos?
Absolutely. And I'm not creating any of those things. I'm not creating the sun. I'm not making it rain. I'm not controlling the wind, and I'm not controlling what's happening in the earth. I'm impacting it though, by being mindful and aware of it, and then supporting some things to thrive and survive while others maybe are pests to that ecosystem. And now I want to use that word carefully because even weeds have a place in the garden, right? Like everything in an ecosystem is designed for that ecosystem to regenerate. If I did nothing and mankind did nothing at all, we would see the planet restore. So everything about the crisis that we are facing is a human crisis. It's not a planetary crisis. The planet's
like more about us getting out of the way when you phrase it the way you did.
Yeah. And the more we get out of the way, the less inputs we start to need. And what I mean by that is, but it does take time for that to develop. So if you've ever watched, there's this amazing documentary called The Biggest Little Farm on Netflix. It's a fascinating documentary on how they took over kind of a fairly desolate field in California and farm and basically regenerated it over 7 seasons. Now, mind you, it's done with a lot of money and a lot of backing in many ways, but they regenerated an ecosystem, but they had to go through almost like biblical level challenge, like snails just come in and take over everything, but then, or slugs or whatever. And then all of a sudden they have to go through all the challenges that come with the different pests that are coming in, but then the ecosystem over time starts to resolve itself. Like for example, if you have
to respond.
If you have a ton of slugs, one of the best ways is to let ducks come in. So how do you let ducks come in? Well, you build a little pond, then they start naturally showing up. Then they thrive off the slugs, so then they reproduce, and then there's more ducks that take care of the slugs, and then all of a sudden the ducks create a problem, but then something comes and gets the ducks. And it's like weirdly enough, the more that we try and impose our will for the pursuit of profit and profit alone, and I understand that because I've been an entrepreneur now for 16 years. So I understand the balance between, and I think it's actually necessary for us to find balance between the ROI of return on investment, traditional ROI, and the other ROI of ripple of impact. And I don't think that those two things and forces have to be mutually exclusive. It's just that when are you going to calculate the ROI of return on investment and at what time frame? Because if you calculate on the short-term time frame, building a farm is incredibly capital intensive and probably doesn't pay you back at all. But if you look at it over a very long-term time frame, it's incredibly lucrative. It's literally the most generative opportunity of all time. And there's so many reasons. I've made videos that explain, 5 reasons why I'm retiring from marketing and starting a farm and building a farm. It's like there is so much more abundance in every way, including money, that comes from building generational wealth and generational and making generational decisions that will far outlast my own life. And it's the best possible thing I can do. And particularly in a world where it's like, you'll own nothing and be happy, like that whole narrative, and whether you subscribe to that or not, whether you believe it's happening or not, I think there's quite a case for it unfolding, specifically as people are meeting in Davos right now and continuously talking about it. But the point being is that when we're living in that reality at this moment, man, there is nothing more sane and also more radical to do than to just take like personal responsibility for your own consumption, personal responsibility for your own habits, and just get involved. And that doesn't mean that everyone has to plant fruit trees or do whatever. It's like, you know, I say this all the time. Where does a farm stop and end? Does it stop and end because you're the person who's planting the things in the ground? Or what about if you're doing the accounting for the farm, or you're doing the website for the farm, or the videography for the farm?
Or if you're eating the food, you know, it takes all the hands and all the lands to bring us to that table together. And so what I wanted to say is that, you know, the subtle piece that we have to arrive at here is like, yes, it's about our individual responsibility 100% and sovereignty and all these things. But what we're actually coming towards is community, because the reality is no one can do it alone.
Far from.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And the new paradigm of consciousness is making that very clear as well. And again, so how does the community play a role in your farm and with what you're building?
It's an absolute lifeblood. First of all, I'm only here being as one of the spokespeople because it's easier to have just me in a podcast rather than the entire village. But the idea being that like none of this is possible without every person and plant and animal participating and playing a role within it. Yeah. And so there's an enormous amount of people behind me that have been involved. And I just so happen to be the guy who walked out into the field and bought the field in the first place. But I hate that because it's not, I didn't buy it. I just decided irrevocably that I was going to take care of this land. It's like I made myself mayor of this area. And I just decided like, I am dedicated to this in the same way that a father is dedicated to his son.
You know what that is, bro? You know, I mean, do you know what that is, what you're speaking to? It's not about ownership in the new paradigm. It's about stewardship. It's like, my heart is with this land and this place, and I'm devoted to stewarding this place. Like what you're saying, like I'm not doing it for a short-term gain. I'm in this for the long game, for a generational, you know, impact.
And I would say that it's stewarding me.
Ooh.
It's changing me.
Yeah.
As much as I give it, it's giving me so much more. I mean, am I on this podcast? Am I gaining all the momentum that I've gained in my own personal life and my own personal wealth, happiness, connection, whatever it is, without me doing this stuff? Like, how much more has it given me? And
this is what we call being in the flow or the stream of abundance, or, you know, you're in the flow of reciprocity because you are giving yourself to this land, to this place, that then the opportunities are coming back to you threefold, tenfold. And that's how it works. And this is something that we're teaching. Yeah. And we're talking about, you know, within these communities. What did you want to say right here?
No, I was just going to say that, like, and if you show up consistently, yes. Because that's the beautiful thing about seasons is you can't see a season in a single moment. What I mean by that is like, I can feel the sun of summer and I can see the impact that it had. But when I show up, like what changed the farm, what changed the entire fact that we were able to build this community was I decided, and then others joined, that I was going to go every single Saturday. So at the beginning, it was like, okay, let me go here and there when I can. But again, we have to understand there was no shade, there was no power, there was no water, there was no shelter, there was absolutely nothing on the farm. So to be there for a very long period of time was very difficult. Like we didn't have a way of cooking. We didn't have a way to go to the bathroom. We didn't have water. I mean, starting a farm without water is very challenging, right? Like we've dug a pond day one, but like to water everything by hand, the more you plant, it's very, very, very challenging. So you start having respect and continuously being humbled over and over and over again from that process. And what changed everything was the devotion of like churches every Sunday. And so wrote out the dogma without any specific religion and anything related to this. And, you know, it's amazing how you hear the word, so many people hear the word community and say cult right after. And I get it. Without any dogma or any specific religion, it became kind of a pilgrimage of sorts to get involved and to continuously do this. And like any good pilgrimage, if you're really paying attention and you're dedicated to it on a long enough time scale, it pays back so much more. Like it is unbelievable the amount of goodwill that this farm has created, the reach that it's had, the capacity for us to do so many things. And it's so regenerative to everyone who comes that it's led to, we just had our first women's circle this Sunday. I didn't lead it, of course, but there was a beautiful women's circle, and I heard it went really well. We've been doing men's circles. We started at the end of last season, and that's going really well. So there's so many events, there's so many opportunities for people to get involved and engaged. And it's amazing how little people know about anything. They don't recognize it, yet they have it all the time. They drink, you know, like somebody's like standing on a patch of mint, and I'm like, hey, do you smell that? And they're like, yeah, it kind of smells like mint. And I'm like, yeah, because you're standing in it right now. And you didn't realize, but there was the path right there, and you just walked off the path without considering where your steps were. But yet, if you were paying attention, you saw the path was super clear. There was rocks on either end, and there was wood chips down on the ground. And if you understand why we did that and what is happening, you'll start to see it's a consciousness we just don't have. And yet we have a consciousness for like a notification on our cell phone. Like we have a consciousness for how to intuitively scan through Netflix.
Why not an alert when you're veering off the path? And so what I love about that very beautiful and analogy, simply put, is that in the new paradigm with our conscious awareness, we are now speaking up in real time. We are calling men, women in real time. And I love that. It's just like, it's a gentle nudge to please don't stand on the mint. Please walk gently. Please be mindful of your steps.
It is an absolute surrender experience.
Because how we do anything is how we do everything. And those who came before, who colonized, we can't walk those same steps. We can't walk in that same disrespectful way. This is the new conscious awareness. I love that you said that.
Yeah,
it comes up in our gatherings all the time, especially in the desert. You know, we do gatherings in the desert. We're very clear, like, to tell the men, hey, please don't pick any white sage. Like that grew here and it belongs here. Or like, you know, be mindful if you're walking off a trail, stepping on a cactus. I mean, these are like very gentle but important, very important pieces, because if we don't have the basics, you know, all of these other complex things that we think we could do as humans become misaligned, and we're seeing that play out.
Yeah, and I think what we're also seeing play out is this kind of elitism sometimes and I'll speak to the negative consequences sometimes of like, it's easy for us to, it's almost like the way we're speaking right now, it sounds like we're putting nature above man. And here's what I want to say. We're not putting man above nature. We're not putting nature above man, where man is nature and nature is man. I think that's the message that has to be heard. Like the regeneration is that we are part of that regeneration. We are the regeneration. So regeneration of the soils actually starts with regeneration of self. It starts with your own psychology around what you've been conditioned to continuously have. We live in an attention-based economy where everything is about capturing your attention right here, right now. And everything is about satisfaction loops and feedback loops that are quick, now. Right? That's what notifications are. That's what social media is. That's what all of everything that we are consuming in our media system today and in our education system and everything that we are generally consuming on our cell phones and on our screens, our black mirrors, as I like to call them, is about that now, this immediate creation of a need, or here's the ad that's going to do that. And the interesting thing is that I have actually my feet in both those worlds. I live in the city, and I've worked in marketing and storytelling for a very long time. That's how I've afforded this farm. Right. And I've always done it with brands that I believed in and people, brands you've for sure seen and people that you've for sure seen and know. And I don't need to name drop any of them. But the point is that you've definitely seen my work Okay. But the interesting thing is, but then there's this whole other side of me and of many people that is planted firmly into the ground, into the soil, that's barefoot and truly integrated in nature. And so I really want to, remind people that it's not about like, we have to value nature above ourselves and that somehow you have to pillage yourself and be a martyr for all of these different things. Now, that being said, changing your paradigm from short-term thinking to long-term thinking is going to feel like a martyrdom. You're going to have an ego death. Like, you're going to experience all the things that come with like, well, wait a second, well, who owns it? And what if I could control this? And then like, you have to get rid of every level of that. And it is a process. And I am far from done that process.
Well,
I don't know if I ever
yeah,
will be.
where are you in that process for yourself and with your community? Because I also felt that, and you're like, I don't like being the guy that paid for the place, but like, these are real things. Communities are popping up all over the place right now. People are starting to think about combining incomes and economies. I mean, that's just the reality of, I feel like, the time that we're in, and not from a place of scarcity necessarily. No. It's like coming from a place of like knowing that there's a different way of utilizing and leveraging our resources for the greater good. You know what
Absolutely. I mean? Yeah. And I think it requires pioneers to do that. Meaning, I don't think we're going to get there by just, I actually don't believe a ton in collective leadership in all aspects of all things all the time. I actually believe that there is value in having councils or a few leaders who are really good and really understanding and really wise compared to others. Meaning, if let me ask you very quickly, very easy, right? Because, and obviously there's an exaggeration. Would I rather be led by 100 12-year-olds or like 2 80-year-olds who have clear experience in farming on how to build a farm, right? So more.
Actually, I'm going to go with those children in that analogy, because I'm thinking of which 2 80-year-olds you're talking about. Because if they're the 2 you mentioned earlier, I'm not going with them, bro. I'm going with the children. I know where you're going with the analogy, but I'm going with the children.
So I think that, in fact, so this is and it was a trap question. I think, no, truly, because I think that the 80-year-olds who have the wisdom of farming will know some of the ways to help guide the children and to support the children in understanding and co-creating the world that they want to have. But they're also going to understand that certain children aren't so great at certain things and other children are better at other things. And they're going to celebrate the individualism and the differences between those children in the same way that they would celebrate the differences between plants. Because to treat a tomato plant like it's a cactus is not going to work. And yet our system continuously says everyone needs to pass a standardized test to do this standardized thing, to do this other thing. And so I believe in the wisdom of the 80-year-olds, the right 80-year-olds, of course, to help guide the creativity of those children.
Of course.
We need every layer of the ecosystem. And you asked me the question, like, where do I see myself in my journey in this? And where I'm at in this journey is I understand that I'm one of the elements in the ecosystem. Now, I'm a very dominant element of this ecosystem because I was one of the first things that took over the ecosystem and participated in stewarding that ecosystem to begin with. And so, of course, an enormous amount of information and history about the project and about this community and all the things that go with it have come with that. And then, of course, my personal resources have fueled an enormous amount of growth on this project. So of course my influence is literally on everything, but I can tell you so many times over that I am not the person necessarily with the most amount of, because I like to measure success in different metrics. So success could look like money in the world of finance and capitalism, but it also could look like number of steps on, boots on the ground. So I always say that, like, one of the metrics that we are optimizing for at the farm is the number of boots on the ground for the amount of time that they're on the ground. The more time they spend on the ground, the more boots there are on the ground, the more successful our community is. And then people are like, oh, that's interesting. Like, that's a very interesting way of thinking about it. And then I get to the point of like, how can we create currencies that match that honor, that's something we all democratically have. The most democratic thing of all time is time itself.
Right.
And so how can I honor the amount of goodwill that people are putting into this project, and what can we do to build that? And so there's a lot that I do to I kind of front run elements of the community, because I've just been involved in thinking about it for 10 years. And so somebody who's coming in tomorrow or who came in last week obviously doesn't have the same knowledge and or the same confidence that it takes to make that happen, but they have way more tools and way more everything available at the farm for them to accelerate way faster than it took me to do. And I believe that our farm is kind of like we're a seed bank from which many other communities will flourish. Like, and I know that it's already happened. You know, it happened when we built an earthship, and we were the first people to ever get a stamped and approved earthship. If you don't know what an earthship is, it's buildings built out of tires, bottles, cans, recycled materials. It's pioneered by this guy, Michael Reynolds, in the deserts of New Mexico. Anyway, long story short, we built the first earthship that was like stamped and approved by the Quebec government, right? By our state government here. And then because we did that, we have the type of law where everyone else now has the capacity to build that same building in any variation. Like, so as long as they're building an earthship greenhouse, they're allowed to do it because we were able to set the precedent. And so that's where like we get to be those disruptors. And I think that's where we come up with the name Valhalla, is that the Vikings, to me, you know, we're training for if you don't know the mythos of Valhalla, it's a Norse mythology or Viking mythology where they're training for the Battle of Armageddon. So the honorable men and women who lived an honorable life and served their community and served their gods and served their way of life would die and go to the land of Asgard and train in this great hall called Valhalla for the battle of good versus evil, for the Battle of Armageddon, so to speak. Okay, it's a simplification of the mythos, but it gives you an overview. And I think we're doing that same thing. I think we're building a form of Eden on Earth, and without being like I don't know, facetious or like
you don't want to come across as utopian.
No, exactly. Yeah, this is not a utopian. Like it's very functional, and I'm very focused on like how does this actually function, and like you know another metric of the farm success is how many calories are we producing. Just number of calories that we're producing for edible foods and landscapes of all.
What were the other two? You got boots on the ground, calories produced.
Boots in the ground, microbiology in the soil. So how much microbiology and how much nutrients do we have in the soil is another metric that I would follow. And another metric that I love to talk about, I've actually never talked about this super publicly, is the amount of laughs. How many laughs? Right? The more laughs we have at the farm, and smiles and laughs, I think that is a downstream metric of all the things that make our farm successful. So,
yeah. And that's how you measure the impact. You know, that's what you're saying. You're measuring the impact, not just through the current system, but through the old ways. Because these ways that you're measuring are also the old ways. You feel me?
I more than feel you. I didn't invent these metrics. You know what I mean? Like,
you're just acknowledging. You're
well before I was.
Yes, but that acknowledgement is necessary. And so, how I see you, Mark, is like we need people to build bridges to the new earth.
Totally.
And so that's how I see you. Some of the words that have come through and feeling your energy. It's like, yeah, man, you're really building bridges to the new earth, even in the way that you see, like, yeah, the first time I did it, it was very difficult, but now people are rocking and it's coming together. And so with that, like, just want to invite you to let people know where they can connect with Valhalla Farms, where they can connect with the Superhero Academy. Yeah, some of the other projects you have going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, if you got to this point in the podcast, you already know where the links are. You've listened to podcasts before. If you want to find the links, you know where to find them. I'm sure they're properly stowed away in the show notes and all the different things in the description and all that stuff. But here's the thing. Here's what I invite you to really consider. If you're listening to this and you got to this point in the episode, you really understand and understood something, and it's something clearly resonated in your heart. And what I ask of you is not how you could follow me, it's how you could follow it. Right? How can you truly know that what I was saying and what I was sharing and what Adam was able to kind of, ask questions about in this, how do you know that this applies right now in your life? Like, how can you go and get involved in farming or in regenerative agriculture or in building community or in stewarding community in some way, shape, or form? And where can you show up? Where can you follow? And where can you be of humble service because you realize maybe you're the kid and not the old man? And where can you understand where you're the old man, right? And or old woman, of course, right? The idea being, you already know that there's something fundamentally wrong that is unfolding in this planet and in this world. And if you don't know, you wouldn't be listening to this podcast. So if you are, then please get involved and realize, like, start with where you can follow and where you can get involved and how you can support. Because if you become a really great supporter, then you'll understand what it takes to be a great leader. And I've learned that the hard way. I've made every mistake possible in the book. I've learned so much about, telling stories online and teaching entrepreneurship and learning entrepreneurship over the last 16 years. I run a podcast called Superhero Academy. I absolutely love it. I do it. Honestly, I don't even care who listens. I just do it because I love it. And the same is true with the farm. It's not about who's showing up. It's like about the continuous process of just showing up and the value that provides for me and everyone around me. And the truth is out there because people just keep showing up in droves. It's amazing how much the ecosystem around me is continuously growing. And it's amazing how much our culture wants to celebrate, like, oh, he's the founder, he's the guy who created it. And it's like, that's great. And I appreciate it. I accept all that celebration. And let me continuously reflect back to you that you know the answer, you know how to get involved, and you know what you can do to show up. And if you don't know, then feel free to follow. Feel free to show up in a way where you click with your attention. You vote with your attention every single time, right? Who needs to hear this? Who do you think this is going to inspire? Maybe it's a loved one, maybe it's a best friend, share it with that person and give the love with your attention, with your clicks, with your time, energy, attention, and everything that you have around you, and realize that Adam and Sacred Sons and so many of these men are serving you in so many different ways. And the littlest of gestures makes a huge difference. So, yeah, you know where the links are.
You already know. You already know. They already know, Mark. They already know.
They do.
Truer words have never been spoken because we do. We already know, and the invitation is to tap in and find out. Share your inspiration. Who needs your inspiration right here, right now, after you just got charged up? Who needs your love? Who needs your attention? I love that you brought that into, the economy of the new paradigm. Like, let's be mindful of where we're giving our attention. I want to thank our brother Mark for joining us and dropping some wisdom. You already know. I feel like that when I almost want to title the podcast, You Already Know, but it'll probably say something about regenerative agriculture.
You can say both, really.
Mark, Sacred Sons will be coming to Canada and specifically to Montreal. We have some good brothers up there at some point in the future, and would love to connect with Valhalla Farms. Thanks for your time and for your inspiration today, brother.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for doing what you do and for taking the time to make this. I think it's deeply inspiring, and the work you guys are doing with Sacred Sons is deeply inspiring to me, and is definitely informing me on how I can lead the men's circle that we've started with a bunch of men here, and Montreal's lagging behind in some ways, and is leaps and bounds ahead in others. But your work and all your work at Sacred Sons is amazing. And deeply, deeply inspiring. So yeah, a ho to you, brothers, for all of that.
Received. Thank you. With that, Marc Coppola, Adam Jackson, Sacred Sons, Valhalla Farms. Let's grow, fam. We're out. Peace.